want to tell you a story of a person a while ago who walked in to the doors of Journey on a Sunday morning, and they would self-describe their life in pretty significant turmoil, lots of questions, lots of heartache, lots of uncertainty. They would tell their own story and say it was semi-miraculous. I kind of got through the door of a place, that I got here. That day, they interacted with some people. Some people interacted with them. They began to have some conversations and had a good enough experience, got a big enough glimpse of Jesus' love through people that the next week they brought somebody with them who also has some of the same trauma, but is very probably skeptical about Jesus in a place like this in a church. Because they said, you've got to experience this. You got to experience this. And so one week it's somebody can barely get through the door. They encounter enough love and enough glimpse of Jesus that they want to bring somebody else back to experience it with them again. Part of that's because you love well and you lean in towards Jesus really well. I'll tell you a story. About a year ago, there was a parent sitting in this room last summer, in varying degrees of being around church and being around Jesus, but a unique and pretty unfortunate and painful set of life circumstances kind of just kept nudging that person to past church and past Jesus places to the literal person of Jesus. And it becomes this Jesus encounter that radically shapes a life. Doesn't make it perfect and easy in a blink, but radically begins to shape a life. Over the course of the next year, that parent gets to watch each of their children also enter into relationship with Jesus and experience his salvation and the gift of his life. Just all over the course of a year or so. Several years ago, there was a couple that started coming to Journey, a family, and the couple would sometimes come separately and sometimes not together. They were just in a very, very rough season. And they, over the course of time, had people rally around them. They put themselves in an environment where people could rally around them. They made some moves to just risk some engagement. And I mean risk it. They risked vulnerability. They risked some engagement. And through these people and these engagements, they begin to really meet Jesus. They begin to really experience Jesus healing. There begins to be this remarkable restoration in their marriage, and then as a result of that, in their broader family. And so a few years ago, they came here just desperate and kind of saying, how am I going to get my next breath? They actually now live this life in which they're constantly saying, look, when we go to our jobs and when we go engage where our kids are and when we are in our neighborhood, what is Jesus doing here? How am I a part of that? How is Jesus inviting me to be part of what he's doing there? I mean, it's just this remarkable and radical transformation over time. I don't know about you, but I love those kinds of stories. I love them. That's the kind of stories that I think heaven is going nuts about. That Jesus actually came to make possible. It's why for 12 years we've had one mission, one single heart desire, one thing for 12 years. It's to help as many people as possible experience a life-giving relationship with Jesus. That's it. That's the one thing. It's got different expressions and different movements and different looks, but that's the one thing that drives them all. This one thing. Which is why those stories matter, yeah? It's why those life change. It's why every single life change story matters. No matter how subtle or how slow or how dramatic or how fast, every single life change story matters. Because that wasn't our thing. I mean, that was Jesus' thing, right? Jesus said, I came so people would have life. That's why I came. That's why I came. And so we want to be a part of that. And as much as those stories paint a picture I want to paint you another picture. It's the picture of kind of fall around here, late September, early October, late October. It's the picture again of kind of a new year, January, February. And me not doing this on a Sunday and wandering around and just watching things happen that I don't get to see happen every single Sunday. And wandering into a parking lot in the back and watching cars drive in and not find a spot and drive out and drive away. And I watch it. And I watch it, and at the same time I hold these stories. And do you automatically see the tension those stories create? Do you automatically see like the wrestling of the soul that begins? I mean, it doesn't take long, right? And honestly, I hope the disparity of stories like that, I hope that the different images, I actually hope they create tension in you. Just to be candid, I hope they create tension in you. If we're going to follow Jesus and we're going to live his mission in the world, I hope those kind of stories create you. Because here's the thing, if you want to find times in the story of God where Jesus was angry, it was always when it was hard for people to get to him. It wasn't really when people were sinning. He was running towards people who were sinning. He was frustrated and angry when people were making it hard, or places or things or circumstances were making it hard for people to get to him. It just set off all these alarms in Jesus. And so when we hold those two and we just realize, look, we've got some limitations in this building. Here's what we can't do. And here's what we'll refuse to do. We'll refuse to be complacent. We will resist until, for as long as we live, we will resist complacency. Complacency is one of the fastest killers of the soul. It's one of the most slippery slopes. We launched out of a church called Kentwood Community Church that was pastored for a long time by Wayne Schmidt. Wayne Schmidt said to me, one of the first things he said when we planted 12 years ago, he said, John, I'm begging you. After every milestone, please watch out. Please watch out for the creep of complacency because it kills souls. And it's true. It's true. So we got to make a move. So you say, well, what's the move, right? I mean, we've got this thing of like, okay, let's help as many people as possible experience full life in Jesus, right? We're not going to argue each other about that. Of course, that's what we want to do. So the next move is, well, let's just build a bigger building, right? I don't know if you've noticed, we're landlocked. There's not a lot. Part of the reason we have a parking problem is there's not many places to go, right? And here's the thing. When we moved in, people were like, hey, can you buy that land back there? It wasn't full. It didn't have anything. Can you buy that land? Can you buy that land? Can you buy that land? I mean, and maybe the answer was yes, but really the answer was no. For one, we couldn't afford it. We just weren't going to do that. And I actually think that was God's sovereignty not allowing that to be open for us, not allowing us to have the money to do it, because it put us in a place where we had to hear what Jesus would invite us into next, which led us to this thing of saying, look, really, we're not called to build bigger buildings. What we're really called to do is launch 5 locations in the next 10 years, 5 life-giving locations in the next 10 years. And so, okay, how do we do that? How do we launch people out of here? How do we go other places? And that can look like 100 different things, but how do we do that? And so we made this move towards Middleville. And if you don't know, a little over a year ago, there was a small fire there. And we've been recovering, and now we're over a year into that, and insurance red tape, and one day there will be just a tragic comedy written about the last year in that whole ordeal. But there's actually movement, right? I mean, look, we can even actually see movement. There's actually built what looks like, yes, you should applaud it and celebrate it and all those good things, right? I feel like I should say to you, I always knew it was going to happen. I'm just going to be honest with you. The last year, there have been days where I thought, yeah, we're done. Okay? But there it is. It's finally starting to move and take shape. But here's the thing. Buildings take time, right? Even once they're in motion. So what we've got to ask is this simple question. Hey, what are we going to do this fall? Because there's another fall coming. There's more people coming, and it's more people you're inviting. Right? That's how the largest majority of people still come here, is because somebody invites them. I can tell you what we can't do. And you already know, right? we can't do what we've done the last 2 years. Right? We thought we were going to launch Middleville. Obviously, we didn't get to do that fast enough. That's still coming, but we can't just sit here and wait for that for another fall. So what are we gonna do with that? Well, we don't know everything yet. Let me tell you what we do know. We know we can't do the same thing we've done again. We know that building's not ready to be moved into yet in a fully functional, invite people sort of way. So what we do have to figure out is how this fall do we navigate adding a third service to the life of Journey. And that's what we know. Now let me tell you what we don't know. We don't know what it looks like. It might be a third service right here. It might actually be mobile for a while in Middleville. It's maybe. We'll see, right? We're talking about it. Staff's talking about it. Advisory team's talking about it. I met this week with 3 focus type groups just talking about that and other things and just listening and saying, okay, what are we going to do? Because we know we can't do the same thing again. We know we can't do the same thing again. We got to continue to create more space. I'm still inviting people. You're still inviting people. There's still people who haven't been invited. They're finding us too. But if we really want to help as many people as possible experience full life in Jesus, we can't spend another fall in that, right? We just can't. And I didn't even talk about the barriers inside the building, okay? It looks really easy to find a seat today because it's June 30th. But some of you know the seat wrestle sometimes, right? In the fall and in the winter. Some of you get it. It's why some of you come at 8, like at 9, 10 to get your seat, right? I get it, okay? And we've tried to be creative with parking. And for those of you that park off-site, behind the mall and at the library and at the bank and even way over in front of Little Caesars. For those of you that do that, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We've tried creative seating, and for those of you that have tried creative things with seat, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We've tried, and we've got to make another move. Now, what I know is we have to do it. What I don't know is exactly what it's going to look like. Can I tell you one more thing I know? I just know human reality enough to know that some of you, as soon as the words got out of my mouth that we got to get to a third service, some of you wouldn't do it out loud, but internally, and you quickly started scrolling other churches. Okay, maybe not that far. Okay, but listen, let's be honest with one another. Let's just have a moment of candidness if we're going to talk about living the mission and pushing against complacency. Let's have an honest conversation. Does anything like that take some sacrifice? Of course. I'm not going to stand up here and say it'll be the easiest thing we've ever done. It just does. Okay, it just does. It's part of how we follow Jesus. Sometimes it takes some sacrifice. But I also want to help you see the dividends of that, the return on potential sacrifice. Most of you probably know, but Journey for 7 years was mobile in a school, Duncan Lake Middle School, 2 environments, in a cafeteria for 3 and an auditorium for 4. Okay. You probably know at least some of that history. But here's what I would love for you to do. Would you just right now stand if you were never actively a part of Journey in that school? Will you just stand up? If the only point of reference to active Journey engagement you have is in this building, will you just stand? Just stand up. Okay, just peek around the room. Don't sit down, just peek around the room. Sitters and standers, peek around the room. Okay. Before we got here, there was 150 people who sacrificed financially to get here and lots of hours in set equity into making it. It wasn't easy, and at times it was hard, and at times it was discouraging, and at times it took a lot of waiting, and at times we weren't sure it was really going to happen. We didn't really know what the outcome would be, and we didn't, right? But we would do it all over again. And now all of us get a chance to do that. Imagine if you and I sacrificed together a little bit, and a couple years from now, there's a whole different group of people who are standing and sitting, different standers and sitters, because we made a move. You can go ahead and be seated. I just wanted you to see it. Oh, I'm glad you're here. I love it, and I love that we get to do it together. Listen, we don't know what it looks like. In the next handful of weeks, we'll figure it out, and we'll talk some more about it and kind of let everybody know what we're doing. But I just wanted you to know it was coming. I want you to know it's coming. I want you to know that we're always going to be willing to sacrifice to live this thing with Jesus. We're always going to resist complacency. We're always going to say, look, what is Jesus inviting us to in this moment to help as many people as possible experience a life-giving relationship with him? What is Jesus inviting us into right now that allows us to partner with him in more stories like we like I shared with you at first, right? That's part of the adventure. So, again, just wanted you to know it's coming, give you a little, let us kind of experience it and walk it as one group and as family a little bit. So thanks for some minutes to share and to talk a little bit about that. At the very same time, I'm really glad that you're here for installment 5 in the series Psalm 23. There are series that we end. Every series has this little manila file folder that gets lugged around for months in my backpack, in and out all the time, right? And some of them come to an end, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I was done with that. Some of them come to an end, and they sit on the ledge in my house for a little bit longer because there was something in me that wished it could have continued. This is kind of going to be one of those. I'm going to set that on the ledge this afternoon. There'll be a little part of me that agrees. Because sometimes I don't even know if it matters to you. I just know God's doing something in me, right? And I'm kind of along for the ride. And this has been one of those series. And it is again, even as we kind of finish it up. And so I'm really, really glad that you're here. I'm wondering if we could stretch the box just a little bit. I wonder if we could just read Psalm 23 together. Okay, this often read, often quoted funeral psalm in different places and psalm. We're going to put it on the screen. Can we just read this together? You guys ready to read? Say yes. All right, let's read this thing together. Do our best to do it. Here we go. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This guy named David wrote this psalm, and he wrote it as he just reflected on the road of his life and all that he'd experienced, and he wrote it with a lot of highlights. David had great moments. He had great moments of courage and conquest. He had some great moments as a king. He also wrote it with a lot of scars in mind. David had made some bad decisions. David had been scarred at the hands of other people, overlooked and passed by and set up. And David had caused some of his own scarring in life. David at times tried to puff himself up and rely on the wrong things. David at times was an adulterer and a murderer, a thief and a manipulator. David didn't always get it right. David was also scarred just by sometimes life circumstances. Things that you really wouldn't point at any one person and you really wouldn't point at him. You'd just say, ooh, ouch. That was dark. That was dark, David. And I tend to think that as we look at Psalm 23, this reflection on his life with God as his shepherd, it's a little bit more out of those scars that David writes. He writes with some touch points to the great moments and how the shepherd provides, but it's like he writes reflectively out of these scars, and he's coming to these unique realizations about what it's like to experience life with a shepherd, not have a shepherd theory, but have a shepherd experience. And so far along the way, we've just kind of uncovered 4 promises. We'll look at one more today, but here's the first 4 if you're just looking for a little bit of bedrock or where we've been, and you won't be able to write them all down. So if you're kind of new today or figuring out if you want to take a picture, that's fine, whatever. The shepherd lacks nothing but gives everything. God is the shepherd of David, and the shepherd of us owns it all. He owns the earth and all that is in it, right? And yet he gives everything. God is such a giver. God's never been stingy. The shepherd always comes for you, and it's always to bring you back. The shepherd always comes to restore us, especially sometimes after relational trauma where there's this temptation to sit in bitterness. The shepherd always comes, sets us upright, and leads us forward. It's always to bring us back to the rest of the flock and to his goodness. The shepherd's protection plus his direction equals fearless living. There's this rod and this staff that represent God's scriptures and God's spirit, and they lead us, they guide us, and they allow us to live fearlessly. When we know we're protected and we know we have a good direction, we'll do anything. Well, it's when we lack one of those that we find ourselves a little hesitant and a little uncertain. The shepherd's table moves our focus from our enemies to our shepherd. Right in the middle of the presence of our enemies, God prepares this place to sit in his presence. And when we look in his direction, it changes how we view the enemies. Their loudness suddenly gets a little bit removed. get a little bit muted, and there's this presence of the shepherd that changes everything when we lock in and we kind of say, okay, wait, it's about his presence first. And what we've really experienced all along the way is a couple realities that we begin to find wrapped up here toward the end of this psalm. And again, if you're a note taker and you want to start filling in blanks or whatever, that's great. If it's helpful for you, that's great. But one of the things we're learning and experiencing, not just having a theory about, but experience about, is that he is leading. The shepherd is leading. What David looked back on his life and realized that, wait a minute, even when I thought I was leading, it was actually the shepherd leading. And at the times where I wouldn't let the shepherd lead and I did demand that I was the leader, well, those didn't go so well, right? Those didn't go so well. So the shepherd is always leading. He led me to where there was green pastures. He led me to places where my soul could rest and be refreshed. He led me in his care and in his forward movement. He led me and invited me to his presence in the middle of my enemies. The shepherd is always leading. He is at least always inviting us to follow his lead. And David looks back and says, man, I just see it now. There were times I missed it. There were times I looked left or I looked right. But now when I look back, I see, man, the shepherd, God was always trying to lead me. There were always green pastures and still waters available. There was always his presence. And even when I felt surrounded by my enemies, there was always his presence. He's always been leading. And with that in mind, David starts to wrap up this worshipful journal entry in the 6th verse, which we just read. This is what we find. He's kind of bringing it to a close. He's saying, so what I'm really experiencing is that surely, just without hesitation, your goodness and your love, they'll follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You've been leading, but now what I'm also realizing is that you're also following. The shepherd is leading, but he is following. He is following. He says your goodness and your love, or some translations, your Bible might say goodness and mercy. It's really loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life. David as a shepherd is writing with this analogy of dogs that would be used to kind of keep the flock together and protect them. That they would be coming behind. They would help them stay in the path. They'd help them get to the right pen at night. And they'd also be protecting from predators that might be trying to sneak in the back door of the flock. These dogs are always chasing. It's like goodness and love. Goodness and love, goodness and love. Just imagine it for a second that in every breath you've ever taken, God's goodness and love were chasing you down. Which means that anything that has gotten in, God's always been aware. He's always known. He's never been intimidated. He's always been prepared to help and to protect and to guard and to guide and to heal out of his goodness and his love. David looks back at his life and says, man, not only were you leading, but you were always following. Even when I got myself into trouble, even when I was the one inflicting wounds and now scars in my own life, even when I look back at them you were always following, there ready to apply your goodness and your love to my life. Listen, you've never made a decision that God isn't right there following behind, ready to apply his love and his goodness and his mercy to. It's just who he is. David says, man, that's my experience. I needed the shepherd's love and goodness along the way. And really when we put those together and we start to see it and we start to watch the story of Jesus throughout the scriptures, what we realize is that he is leading and he is following, but really, at the end of the day, he's surrounding. God is surrounding our lives. God is literally hemming us in. The shepherd is literally covering every aspect of our life. He's going before us. His glory is described as our rear guard, the one that's coming behind us. He's surrounding our life. Again, meaning nothing gets in without God's awareness, which means nothing is beyond God's ability to heal and restore, rebuild, put back together, shape from a tragedy into a dream, use for good, redeem anything that was evil and make it usable for good. Because he's surrounding us. Psalm 32:7, possibly written by David as well, says this: God, you're my hiding place. You're where I go and just kind of anchored in. Where I go, When the fear strikes, that's where I go, God. You will protect me from trouble, and you will surround me. You will surround me with songs of deliverance. Hey, can I say, part of the story of God is that God puts new songs in your heart and my heart through the stories that we live with him and through the shepherd experience. But even in moments where it feels like there is no song, and even in moments where it feels like we have nothing to offer, the good news is God's always singing over you. Always. And it's always about deliverance. It's always about your good. It's always about his dream for your life. Always, even right now in this moment. The God of all the universe would surround your life and sing over you with songs of deliverance. I love this. This is one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. Prophet Zechariah wrote it just speaking on behalf of God. And he said, then I myself, God speaking through Zechariah to the people of Israel, he says, I myself, I'm going to be a protective wall of fire around Jerusalem, representing God's people, right? And I will be glory inside the city. Here's the picture, right? God is this wall of fire around your life. I mean, how great is that just to think that, man, here I am. It's just me, God? Yeah, man, I'm this wall of fire, man. Nothing gets in without my awareness. Nothing gets in without me already having a plan to use it for good, even if somebody else means it for evil. Nothing gets in that I can't repurpose for my good. Listen to me. Nothing gets in that God doesn't already know. I know, but I'm going to repurpose that for my good. I know, but I'm going to repurpose that for your good. I know. But nothing's beyond my ability to repurpose for your good. Nothing gets into your life which God hasn't already looked at it and said, I know, but I can repurpose that for good. This wall of fire, and then the glory, like this perfected, weighted, protective presence right in the middle of your life. I love it. He surrounds us. And all of that, his leading, his following, his surrounding, so that we can dwell. So that we can actually dwell, so that we could actually live. David writes about, paints this picture about literally dwelling, living in the presence of God, just being at home there, just settling in. He finishes the psalm with this phrase. Just look at the very concluding words of the psalm. He says, I'm going to dwell. I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And forever, a lot of times we can think about eternity, but can I just tell you what David actually wrote? The Hebrew word that David actually used there is a word that David used to say, I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord all of my days. All my days, I'm just going to be in God's presence. All my days, when I look back and I saw, oh, wait, you were always leading. Wait, you were always following. You were always surrounding me. As much as I would be aware all of my days on this earth and in eternity, I was actually in your presence. And again, just picture this for a minute. I mean, David writing this, just reflecting on the own scars of his life. I mean, again, David had scars inflicted by other people. The person that should have mentored David tried to kill David. The spouse that should have been his support abandoned him. The kids who maybe should have given David the benefit of the doubt, maybe should have had an honest face-to-face conversation, they tried to kill him too, put him on the run. David, if you looked at David's life and he looked back, he would honestly see, man, all this built-up scar tissue from just wounds inflicted at the hands of other people. But he'd also look and say, man, I've also done a lot of that myself. Man, I should have really showed up differently as a dad there. I mean, part of the reason my kids did that is probably because I did that. I mean, I never should have stolen that guy's wife and then killed him to try and hide it. Like that's a true story, right? That's not like a John Grisham novel. That's a true thing. Okay. I can't believe that I can't believe that I did that. And yeah, I've got this forgiveness and I've got this grace, but I never should have gotten outside of God's hand. I never should have gone to war, and I never should have counted armies when God told me not to. And now I was supposed to build this temple, and I'm not even going to really get to do that. I mean, David reflects back, and he looks. He says, man, there are times my soul has been dark. It's been dark. It's been dark. There are times I've been hiding in caves. There have been times I felt like I could barely breathe. There have been times I felt like nobody was with me, and the people who were with me, I wasn't sure I was supposed to want them to be with me. There are times where I didn't know how the next day was actually ever going to get here. There were times it was just dark. There were times, God, you seemed so far away, and I wondered why you were so quiet. But you were leading still somehow, and you were following still, trying to protect me, and you were surrounding me. And David looks back at his life, and I don't think writes so much out of all the good. He writes out of a lot of the yuck. And he experiences this promise where he just said, look, in all my days, in the presence of the shepherd's the best place to be. In all my days, the presence of the shepherd is the best place to be. Even when it wasn't easy, the presence of the shepherd was the best place to be. When I made just really dumb, selfish decisions, the presence of the shepherd was the best place to be. When other people trying to harm me, the presence of the shepherd was the best place to be. When it was so quiet and I wondered where in the world God was, what I really needed to see and what I was really invited to see was that even in the quietness, the presence of the shepherd is always going to be the best place to be. In all my days, the presence of the shepherd is the best place to be. I'm grateful that David wrote probably out of woundedness and out of disappointment and out of setback. Let me just tell you a little bit about where I experienced this. Just one window. In late 2011 and 2012, there were a unique set of circumstances that felt like they literally just catapulted me. It was almost like, and one morning I woke up and my life was I don't know any other way to describe it other than just say it was oppressively dark. It instantly, it was hard to get up. It was lonely. It was discouraging. It was depressing. And there was this unique set of circumstances, and the longer I sat in it, the more I realized, wait, there are some wounds I'm dealing with from people, and oh no, wait, there are also some I'm dealing with from myself, from my own decisions, right? And it's all coming together in this season. It's like brutally dark. And I knew how deep it was when in early 2012, Eric and I were in the van, and we were driving towards. We're trying to get out of Grand Rapids to drive towards Muskegon. We were going to Maranatha Retreat Center. We were going to an event that we used to do in the early days of Journey called Advance. And we would have kind of all these people who were part of Journey who were leading different ministries. We would all gather at Maranatha in the middle of January. And you'd say, why would you go to Maranatha in the middle of January? Nobody wants to go to the lake in the middle of January. That's why we went, because it was cheap. Okay, nobody else wanted to go, so we went. And we would go and we would spend this day and a half or 2 days or so in this retreat center and just lots of vision and development and prayers and life change stories shared. And it was great times. Some of the most significant things Journey's done have come out of environments like that. And I remember being on the road, and I remember saying to Eric, I can't do this. Like, I can't go do this. I love these things, and I can't go do this. It was so dark and so weird. I literally felt like I wasn't sure I was breathing, let alone going to do something like that. And we pulled off and we went and we sat in this Noodles and Company, and I could take you to the table where we were sitting against this wall. And it's like all this uncertainty and confusion. And I remember kind of looking across the table at her and saying, I can't do this, and yet I somehow know if we get through this season, on the other side, life and ministry, I know somehow it'll be better, right? We'd been through dark seasons before, nothing quite like this for me. But here's the thing, right? I said that, and in my head I knew it was true, and my heart was convinced I was a liar. There wasn't an ounce in my heart and soul to believe that. But I said it. And poor Erica, she's like, okay. And we get back in, and we're literally driving back towards Muskegon. And there was a guy named Ben who had helped us start church. Ben's one of my greatest friends, still one of my greatest friends. Just talked to him this week. And he had helped us start at Journey. And I called him. I said, Ben, I just can't do it. I cannot do this. And like Ben's like talking me off the ledge, like telling me all the reasons I can. You know, in my head, I know they're all true. And in my soul, I think he's a liar. Like, there's just no way, dude. There's no way. And in the middle of all the weekend, I realized this is how deep and this is how dark it is. This is this season. And over the course of the next couple of months, in ways I would never have anticipated, God just very gradually reminded me of his leading, of his following, of his surroundings, so I can dwell. I would get up in the morning, not because I wanted to, not because I felt that I literally would pull. I would literally do what we talked about before. I would literally make my soul go. And I would sit with God at the end of this couch. It's kind of where I happen to be trying to engage with God in the morning at the time. And for whatever reason, felt prompted to read the book of Exodus in the Old Testament of the Bible. Like, let's get out of the wilderness and read about a whole bunch of laws. God, what are we doing, right? And just little by little, in the place I never would have expected it, it's like God just started to remind me, hey, John, right now, like every other time, the best place to be is my presence. The best place to be is my presence. And he began to remind me, and through that story, began to just whisper to me occasionally, not every morning, some mornings there would just be this whisper in my soul, man, John, I love you. Man, I love you. And I'll just tell you straight up, in my head I knew that was true, and in my soul I thought God was a liar. John, then why is it so dark? Then why are we doing this? Then what are we sitting here for? And it was lonely and isolating. I remember one morning in particular, and I've talked about this a little bit before, I'm a walking prayer, and maybe it's because I'm not spiritual enough to stay awake, I don't know, but I walk and pray, and I wandered into our kitchen. I would just kind of walk back and forth to kitchen and living room. I could still take you to the spot where I crossed into our kitchen by the edge of this little cabinet. It's just like I froze. It's like I couldn't take another step. And just standing there in that space, for the first time in my life, God just hugged me. I just knew God was hugging me. Just standing there. And man, I just like fought to keep myself there, just to stand there in it. Right? And what I was starting to experience was this thing of, hey, I hate this season, and now somehow I love this season. And there's a spot in Exodus where Moses says, God, hey, if you're leading, we're going. If you're not, we're not. Because what he's really saying is, this just become an anchor to me the last several years. Moses is really looking at God, and what he's saying is, God, if you're not going, we're not going. And what became true for me is if God wasn't going to leave the dark, I wasn't either. Because his presence in that season was so good. I don't ever want to go back. I'm not signing up for another turn of that, right? But you could offer me all the money in the world, and I wouldn't give up what came out of that season. I would never give it up. Because it's just where I got this deeper reminder than ever that in all my days, in the presence of the shepherd is the best place to be. And here's what I know. There's no maybe about this. Here's what I know that I know that I know. Is that some of you are sitting in dark seasons. It's been way too much rapid trauma or tragedy. It's been way too long in an addiction or a vice. It's been way too long in a slip back to an addiction or a vice. It's been way too overwhelming and stressful and fragmented, and life has pulled it way too many directions for too long. It's been too much bad news all in the last 7 days. Or you may not even know why you're in the dark. But you do wonder, like, where is God? Where's God's voice? Where am I? Why do I feel like God can't hear my voice and I'm not hearing his? And why? And maybe today, God would just like to say to you, I know. And I just want to remind you that in all your days, in my presence is always going to be the best place to be. And I think some of us, we just need a chance to respond. We just need a chance to process it out. So let me tell you what we're going to do in order to do that this morning, okay? Just a portion of our team is going to come, and they're actually going to sing a song that you're not going to know. Probably it's not a song that we sing a lot, but they're going to sing the song, and I want you to just sit and just kind of absorb it and let it soak in a little bit. Because here's the thing, part of our dark season is probably caused by some other people. It's scars at the hands of other people. Some of it's probably caused by ourselves. We've created our own scars. We're living with our own scar tissue. Some of it's just life experiences. We don't know how we got there. We don't know how it happened. But maybe what some of us need today is we just need to sit still for a minute. And in fact, again, I don't think there's a maybe. I just think for some of you, God would love to hug you. I know for some of you that sounds so weird, but I just think God would like to hug you. I think I would like to tell you again, whisper, be close enough to whisper, I love you. And your head may know it, and your soul might first think, no way, God, no way. My head knows you're right, my soul thinks you're a liar. Let him just keep whispering it. Let him just keep whispering it. Let him just keep whispering it. I love you, I love you, I love you. He'll probably call you by name, because that's who he is. Some of you, while we do this, you need to move. You need to let somebody pray for you. And there's going to be a couple of our prayer team in the back, right back in these sections right here. You need to go let somebody pray for you. Can I tell you the hardest thing in that dark season of my life? This is probably the hardest thing. Is when it gets really dark, at least for me, it is really, really hard to trust people. Because everybody feels like part of the dark, right? It gets really, really hard. It's like you want everybody to be around, and yet you want nobody to be around. My family would talk, and I think I want to be with them so bad. And at the same time, I'd be thinking, please stop talking. It's dark, it's confusing, it's overwhelming. But some of you need to just push against that. You need to tell your soul today, you know what? No, I am going to let somebody pray for me. I'm going to go let somebody pray for me. And there's no embarrassment and there's no shame. There's just honesty. There's just honesty. In fact, a few people might look and think, I wish I had that kind of courage. So there's going to be available for you. Others of you, maybe you just need to write. You need to write your own declaration to God. And maybe that's why the back of a blank teaching outline would be helpful. Or maybe you'll take out your phone and you'll just type as fast as you can. And you'll literally just pour out the rawness and the wound and the scar. You'll just pour all of that out. Let God have all of that. Maybe you'd be just desperate enough to say, look, we don't have physical altars here, but maybe this would just feel like an altar, this safe place, this sanctuary where you just went and you grabbed the altar and said, "This God is my refuge. He is the hiding place I'm going to today." However you choose to respond, it's great. But I just encourage you to take the moment and let's learn from David's experience. Let's experience it with him. In all the days of my life and all the days of your life, the presence of the shepherd is the best place to be. Jesus, right now, would you help us be more aware of you than we've ever been? You are our oxygen. You are our life. You're the cool, refreshing water that we need. You're the only voice, really, that we need to hear. So as we acknowledge that we've got all these scars, maybe today would be a turning point where you would help us say, oh man, I don't like this season, but I will never trade it. When it's over, I'm never going to trade it. Maybe today you'd convince us that. Hug somebody today, God. Whisper your I love you as clear and as close as we could possibly.